Hello everyone, Freemantle here. A person has an unalienable right to pursue his happiness, says our Declaration of Independence. That's correct. The Declaration says this is a truth that is self-evident. That's incorrect. The right to pursue your happiness is not self-evident. It needs a proof. If I'm going to pursue happiness and get it, I have to make a lot of good decisions. When I'm going to make a decision about anything, I need to know three things: the circumstances I'll be acting in, the resources of mine I could call on, and I need to know what it would be good for me to do with my resources in these circumstances. That's any decision. The circumstances I may have to investigate a little, but usually they're pretty straightforward, not too tough to figure out. My resources, well, I've got a pretty good idea of what I'm capable of doing, the money I've got, what I'm smart at, what I'm dumb at, and so on. But what it would be good for me to do, now, that's the starting point for decisions. That's also the sticking point. How do I know what the good is? Oh, I have ideas about it, all right. We all do. Everybody has an idea of what he thinks makes something good. But if I'm set on living a good life, by God, that's what I'm going to do. I need to know what idea of the good is the right one. I need a proof of some kind. Now, you may think that nothing of the sort is possible, because you may believe, as most people do, that the way we ought to live can't be proved the way we can prove that the world is round. But I say no. No, if we look all the way down to the most basic idea of the good a person could believe, there is a proof to be discovered of what really makes things good. I mean, scientific type, empirical, logical demonstration. Proof that as rational people, we can't walk away from. I'm going to present that demonstration in this video. Now, this video is more complex than others on this channel. Much easier to read than to listen to. So I'm posting on my Facebook page for free download a transcript of this video and a longer, more complete version of the argument that includes a number of objections and my replies. The address is facebook.com pages Freemantle, but I'll give you that again at the end of the video. The key to the argument I'm going to give you about what makes things good lies in thinking about our thinking. We're asking what makes things good. Why is it important to know that? Because a concept of the good guides all of a person's choices and decisions. You can't make any choice or decision, set any goal, can't figure out whether things are going well or not, can't act for a purpose, and so on, without using some concept of what the good is. Why is it important to know what the good is? So we can make the choices and decisions that actually are the best. What is it to know this? It is to have a sound, rational proof of what makes things good. Here is the argument. Only 3 steps. First step. If it's going to be a rational proof, we can't use the concept of good we already have in order to answer our question of what makes things good. That would be arguing in a circle. So we have to start into this inquiry by putting aside our current ideas of what makes things good. We put them out of our minds and go ahead with this inquiry as if we have no idea of what makes things good or bad. Step 2. Let's think about the question we're asking. What's the good? If we ask that question, something has to be at stake that we value, or we wouldn't care what the answer is. We'd have no basis for caring about it. Think about a horse race. I don't care who wins the race if I don't care anything about horses or racing. There's no issue for me in who wins the race if I have no interest in the horse race at all. If I care about who wins it, something has to be riding on it that I value. If I care about what the good is, something I value has to be at stake. Well, what is at stake? We just said that. All our choices and decisions. Some conception of the good guides all of a person's choices and decisions. So that part of life must be something I value in this inquiry when I seriously ask what the good is. And of course we want a rational proof, so we must value reason too. If I seriously ask what the good is, I must value my life of choices and decisions, and I must value reason. Third step. There are two kinds of value. Something can be good just in and of itself. That's called intrinsic value. Or something can be good as a means of something else, valuable as a means to an end. That's called instrumental value. In this inquiry, I value my life of choices and decisions, but how? As a means to an end? No, I can't value it that way because you have to have a concept of the good in order to think that something is good as a means. And we put that aside when we started the inquiry. We put aside our conceptions of what the good is. So in this inquiry, we have to value our lives intrinsically. That is, just in and of themselves. What this tells us is that we should protect our lives, fulfill them, live them well, and be happy, not as a means to some other end, but just for their own sake. And we should do this whatever else we are also doing. So, I ought always to think and act according to my life as an end in itself. And the same is true for you. This is the starting point we were looking for. A concept of the good on which we can base all our decisions and choices. This is the basic, rational, factual, objective principle that makes something good or bad. What makes something good is that it is part of living my life as an end in itself. What makes something bad is that it works against living my life as an end in itself. I call this the argument from inquiry. Its conclusion is, I ought always to think and act as required by my life as an end in itself. There is a name for this way of living, in which a person always thinks and acts according to his life as an end in itself. Just to say the name raises most people's hackles. They're sure if any way of living is wrong and bad, this one is. But I'm not going to be shy about it. The name is ethical egoism. People think this means everybody tearing at everybody else's throat. They think it means, screw you, buddy. Don't get in my way. I look out for number one, and to hell with you and everybody else. That is all completely false about egoism. But here I'm only going to draw one conclusion from what I've said so far. And for this purpose, I'm going to shorten the principle a little bit. Instead of saying, I ought to think and act as required by my life as an end in itself, I'm going to say, I ought always to pursue my self-based interests. My life as an end in itself, shortened to my self-based interests. The conclusion I want to draw from what I've said is this. Each person should pursue his own self-based interests while letting other people alone to pursue theirs. Here's how we draw this conclusion. If I were the only living thing in the universe, the principle that I ought always to pursue my own self-based interests could only mean that I ought to secure as much good for myself as possible within physical limits. Whenever I asked that it would be good for me, but should I do it, the answer could only lie in whether the action would pay off well enough and whether I would succeed in it. But since there is more than one person in the real world, the meaning of I ought to pursue my own self-based interests is much wider, because that principle logically applies to all people who are relevantly the same as I. That is, at least, all ordinary human adults. All these people should be pursuing their respective self-based interests. That is what should happen in the world. Things are morally wrong unless it is happening. I must be in the wrong then if I cause it not to happen. Obviously, I do that if I interfere with another person who is pursuing his self-based interests, a person who's not himself interfering with other people who are pursuing theirs. I'm in the wrong if I interfere with a person who is, so to speak, minding his own self-interested business. So we come to this principle. I may pursue my self-based interest in any way in regard to other people that does not prevent them from pursuing theirs. I should let other people alone to mind their own self-interested business, and I should be let alone to mind mine. I call this the sovereignty principle. The argument from inquiry and the sovereignty principle tell us that two principles of basic liberalism are mistaken and have to be rejected. Number one, the liberals' communitarian principle. It says, the good of society as a whole has higher priority than the interests of the individual, other things equal. No, because the interests of the individual determine what is good. The good of society as a whole should not have higher priority than the interests of the individual. The second liberal principle we have to reject I call the democratic principle. It says, the democratic political process is the best way to establish or maintain the elements of social life. No, it's not. Because this principle runs afoul of the sovereignty principle that a person may pursue his self-based interests any way that does not prevent others from pursuing theirs. He does not need democratic approval to do it, and what the democratic majority wants may be very bad for him. The proper run of democracy comes second to a person's moral right to live his independent life for his independent purposes and to build a life of his choosing on that. The individual life, the individual and his life, not the democratic process, must be the basis for establishing and maintaining the elements of social living in any good society. There are two takeaway points from today's video. What is the good? Number one, to pursue one's own self-based interests. Number two, to do this in ways that leave other people alone to pursue theirs. Again, this video is available in printed form for free download at my Facebook page. The argument from inquiry is also posted there in a longer, more complete form, also for free download. The address in both cases is facebook.com/pages/Freemantle. Thank you for listening.